All right, we are going to review some conditional statements from a problem we had recently in the homework, and then we're going to use that to relook at variables and to re-explore loops like repeat and forever, and a new one called repeat until. So here I have a problem where I want to take some numbers between 1 and 10, figure out which ones of them are greater than 7. So the simplest way to do this is with a repeat 5 times, where we ask for a number between 1 and 10. We check to see if the answer given is greater than 7. If it is, we change our variable numbers above 7 by 1, and we do that 5 times. Now, what doesn't happen here is there's no check to see if the number is actually greater than 1 and less than 10. So I can easily enter numbers that defy what we were asking for, which is, not great, but it does the basics of what it's supposed to. It checks to see if the answer given was greater than 7, and then it updates our variable to keep track of that. And again, important when we have variables that we set them to some default value to get the script started. Let's throw a check in here. So this version, similar. I've got the same variable numbers above 7, and I'm going to repeat 5 times, and I'm going to ask for a positive counting number, no more than 10. So counting 1, 2, 3, 4 up to 10. So here I'm just going to assume that they're going to enter something like 1, 2, 3, 4. They're not going to enter any decimals or zeros because we're running a counting number, but I want to enforce the less than or equal to 10, no more than 10. So I added a check here. If the answer is less than or equal to 10, then we'll check it to see if it's greater than 7. It's a kind of number we want. If it's not, then what we're going to do is say, whoa, no, we needed a counting number to be no more than 10, like 9 or 3 or 10. And then one more time, we will check, we'll see, okay, they gave us a number, is it greater than 7? And we'll double check that the number is less than or equal to 10. But we're only going to check twice, here and here, and then it loops around again and asks for another number. So in this case, they get 2 tries to get the number right on any particular of these 5 repeats. And if the 3rd time they screw it up, then we just ignore it, and that number does not get counted. Side note, here I have a less than or equal to. Alternative to less than or equal to is greater than. So if I said not greater than, that's the same thing as saying less than or equal to. So the point here is this block right here, the not answer is less than or greater than 10, is the same thing as saying less than or equal to. All right, let's move on. Now, this doesn't really need a procedure because I'm not really repeating much code here. But again, we looked at procedures before. So if I needed to reuse this check in other places, I might want it as a procedure. But again, I'm only checking twice here, not a big deal, don't need a procedure. But for fun, somebody asked me about it, so I thought I'd give it a try. And the procedure was a good thing to write for me because it just reminded me to remind you of the scope of variables. So what does scope mean? Scope means where does a variable exist in your program? And when we create a variable, we have the option of having that variable exist for all sprites or just this sprite. And then when we make a procedure, variables in the procedure only exist in the procedure and not outside. And similarly, things that change outside may not change inside the procedure. So the point of this is not only does my procedure to verify the number have to have a variable called number, but I need a swapping variable inside, an extra variable to keep track of the difference between the number that was originally given right here to a chance for them to redeem themselves and enter a proper answer, right? So they give an answer over here in the repeat 5. it gets sent over to this procedure here. This procedure gets the number, sees if the number is in the range we needed. If it is, it just moves along back over to here and continues the rest of the script. But if I get a number that's not right, then it's going to ask the question again in a slightly different way. And then we're going to get a new answer. And again, we have to deal with that. And so you can't change the original number that came into the procedure. So that's why we need an extra variable here that I called ANS to take that new answer we got and feed it back into the repeat until loop. So nice thing about this is I'm using repeat until instead of just an if check. So repeat until means repeat it if something is true or not. So it's a repeat combined with an if. But it keeps going until you get that satisfied. So in this case, I'm going to repeat until the answer is between 1 and 10, greater than or equal to 1, less than or equal to 10. Once I get a number that's greater than or equal to 10, I'm not going to come inside this loop and ask again for a proper answer. I'm just going to go back to the regular script and do the regular stuff. So again, repeat until is really a repeat with an if, and it will run as long as the thing that we're checking is false. Once it's true, it jumps out of the loop and goes back to whatever is outside. And outside of this procedure is this stuff over here. So again, procedure made this a little bit more complicated because if you tried to do this without the set answer to answer here, these lines right here, it just won't work. So without that extra variable, procedure in this case, because of this extra ask inside, not going to work properly. All right, let's look more at the repeat until without the procedure. So this is chapter 7 stuff. So here's another example, a little simpler without the procedure. And just a reminder, I mentioned before that checking to see if something is greater than or equal to is the same thing as not less than. So I like the not less than because it's shorter. So this big and block here and this big and block here do exactly the same thing. Feel free to pause the video and think about that. All right, so the set answer to 0 actually is important here. It isn't an optional part because I want to get into the loop right away. So that means I need to make sure each time I'm in the loop that I have an answer to start with that makes this condition false. So again, I'm looking for numbers that I'm hoping the numbers I get are greater than or equal to 1, but less than or equal to 10. 0 is outside that range. So immediately upon starting the script, we jump into the repeat until and we ask the question. We get the answer. So we set the answer to that, and then we check to see if that answer is greater than 7. If it's greater than 7, then we count it because that's what we're looking for here. And then we jump back into the loop and keep going. Now, the cool thing about the repeat until is in this, let's pull this here and that there, in this block right here, I notice I have answer here and answer up there. Since we're taking their answer and setting it to the variable ANS, this is going to loop until they give a proper answer between 1 and 10. Right, so that means it's not just checking once, it's not just checking twice, it's checking every single time they enter it. And so we're guaranteed with this procedure here to get 5 answers that are between 1 and 10, or unless the people exhaust themselves typing things that aren't between 1 and 10. And then at the end, I say count it. So again, point of this here is the repeat until that's true. He keeps checking. Sorry, you got to enter a good answer. Sorry, you got a good answer. Now, one downside to the way I did this here is I'm asking the question the same way when they give it wrong here. And it would be better to ask the question differently when they get it wrong. So I have a default way to ask the question, then another way to ask the question when they give it wrong. So I did that back here. right? Please state a positive counting number no more than 10. And then when they get it wrong, then I say, no, 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 and give them a little more detail. So that could be improved on this repeat until. So essentially, a repeat until kind of is like a forever, as long as things are false. So we could also do the same thing as this with a forever. Now, it's a little more complicated with the forever, unfortunately, but let's take a look at it because it is something that is a cool programming technique. On this one right here, let's look at this version. This one right here, I have a count of numbers I'm playing with. And again, I'm looking for 5 good numbers, and I'm also looking for numbers over 7. I have a check here. I'm just checking if it's, I just kept it simple. Is the number greater than 10? But again, we could put in the whole logic for between 1 and 10. It would just be a slightly bigger block in there, no big deal. So again, if they enter something that's out of bounds, then I give them a slightly different prompt for that. And if the number is in bounds, then we jump down here. Now, the reason we need the counter here is because otherwise forever is going to go on forever, and I need a way to stop it. And the way we're going to stop it here is when the counter finally gets over 5, then that's going to jump us down to this else down here, and it's just going to stop the script. Okay, so again, if you want to do something like repeat until, and you want that to happen for a fixed number of times, that's not easy to do with the repeat until. Forever if is a solution there. So with the forever if, I have to have a counter, and then I have to say when the counter is going to stop running. And the stop here, the counter is going to run this as long as it's less than 5. Once it's equal to 5, it'll do one last check, and then it'll say, hey, these are the numbers I find, and then it ends the forever loop, and the script stops the loop. So this is another way to approach this problem. So new ways of using the forever block is forever with a counter. And then we have the repeat until, which keeps repeating until we finally get something that we're looking for, which is a pretty fine skill. Hope you found this useful. This is about half of what we're doing in chapter 7. More later.